The cosmos had captivated me since I was old enough to pronounce the word star. My childhood bedroom was a planetarium of glow-in-the-dark constellations, the bookshelf overflowing with tales of distant worlds and alien civilizations. While other kids dreamed of being doctors or firefighters, I longed to be the one making first contact. My path was set: astronomy. After years hunched over telescopes and buried in research, isolation became my closest companion. The remote observatory perched atop a wind-whipped mountain was my domain. Solitude didn't bother me. The silence was a symphony against the backdrop of the universe whispering its secrets. Tonight was different. An electric energy charged the air, not from an impending storm, but from the data flickering across my screen. For months, I'd been tracking a peculiar signal, an anomaly amidst the rhythmic cosmic chatter. It pulsed with an intelligence that sent chills down my spine. Tonight, on the brink of a potential breakthrough, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the observatory into inky blackness. The emergency generator should have roared to life, but an eerie silence swallowed the room. My pulse pounded in my ears as my hands fumbled for a flashlight, its weak beam slicing through the void. The silence shattered with a deafening crackle from the main terminal. The screens blazed to life, but not with my familiar data. Instead, garbled symbols flashed, indecipherable code bleeding across the monitors. A surge of panic constricted my chest. Was this a system malfunction, or something far more sinister? My shaking hands gripped the edge of the console, desperate for some semblance of control. The symbols flickered faster, morphing and twisting, the chaos mirroring my own spiraling thoughts. I had to reboot the system, isolate the glitch. But as my fingers hovered over the keyboard, a flash of movement caught my eye. A figure stood in the doorway, a silhouette etched against the dim starlight filtering through the windows. It wasn't human. Tall and elongated, its proportions were impossibly wrong. My breath hitched in my throat, fear giving way to stark disbelief. I blinked, but it didn't vanish. "Who are you?" My voice sounded small, fragile against the expanse of the darkened room. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it tilted its head ever so slightly, as if in curious observation. Panic ignited within me, a primal fight-or-flight response that had been dormant for far too long. Lunging to my feet, I bolted towards the exit, the flashlight beam cutting a frantic path through the darkness. The figure surged forward with unnatural speed. I fumbled with the door handle, the metal cold and unyielding. A searing pain shot through my arm as something grabbed me from behind, yanking me backwards. Terror choked me as I fell, my eyes slamming shut in anticipation of the impact. But instead of hitting the floor, I felt myself being lifted, an impossible weightlessness taking hold. My flashlight clattered to the ground, its beam rolling crazily before winking out, plunging me into total darkness. Kicking and thrashing was useless against the unseen force. Fear gave way to a strange, disorienting calm. I knew this was impossible, and yet, here I was, the astronomer about to embark on her greatest and most terrifying discovery. My heart slammed against my ribs as the invisible restraints released me. I landed hard on a surface that felt both soft and unyielding, like nothing I'd ever encountered. A wave of nausea washed over me. Disorientation battled the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Slowly, I cracked my eyes open. The world around me wasn't blackness, but a dim, diffused light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The space shimmered, the air charged with a crackling energy that made my skin prickle. Movement flitted across my peripheral vision. I snapped my head around, trying to pierce the strange haze. Another figure stood near. An examination table? I could just make out the gleaming surface and an array of unfamiliar instruments. No, not just another, but the same. The tall, slender creature from the observatory. Its bulbous head tilted again, and I realized the unsettling truth. It was studying me. I shivered involuntarily, fear turning my blood to ice water. I needed to escape. Gathering my courage, I scrambled backwards. My limbs felt heavy, clumsy, as if I were wading through molasses. The figure moved with an unsettling fluidity, closing in despite my attempts to retreat. "Stay back!" My voice rasped, a pathetic squeak against the echoing expanse of the space. The creature paused, its head cocked to one side. Then, it moved again, this time extending an impossibly long arm towards me. Its fingers, tipped with elongated claws, twitched. With a gasp, I rolled to the side, scrambling across the smooth floor. It was useless. The creature's stride was impossibly long, each step bridging the distance between us with alarming ease. My back hit something solid. A wall, perhaps? Nowhere left to run. Trapped, I instinctively curled into a ball, raising my arms protectively. The creature stopped in front of me, its unnerving gaze fixed on my trembling form. For a long moment, we remained frozen in this tableau, predator and prey. Then, a sound pierced the heavy silence. It started as a low hum, barely audible at first, but quickly swelled into a chilling vibration that rattled my bones. I looked desperately around the room, searching for the source of the sound, but its origin remained a mystery. The vibration intensified, and my vision began to blur. Hot tears welled up in my eyes, born from terror and the overwhelming strangeness of it all. The creature's form warped, shimmering like a mirage, and then a searing white light filled my vision. Consciousness slipped away. I woke with a strangled gasp, heart pounding as if it would burst from my chest. Sunlight streamed through the dusty observatory window, blinding me momentarily. It took several disorienting moments to register my surroundings. The familiar console, the star charts scattered across the floor, the gnawing sense of unease swirling in my gut. It was just a nightmare. It had to be. Yet my shaking hands told a different story. Hesitantly, I lifted my sleeve. There, on my upper arm, was an angry red mark. No ordinary bruise, it seemed to pulse with an alien energy that sent fresh chills down my spine. I stumbled across the observatory floor, legs unsteady. Every creak in the old building, every flicker of the restored lights, made me jump. The experience, whatever it was, dream or reality, had shaken me to my core. I had to tell someone. But who? My colleagues would dismiss it as a stress-induced hallucination, or worse, a ploy for attention. Yet, to dismiss it entirely seemed foolish, even dangerous. Driven by desperation, I dialed Sarah, not as an astronomer, but as my oldest friend, the one who had tolerated my obsession with the cosmos since our shared college dorm room. Her practical nature was a much-needed counterbalance to my head-in-the-clouds tendencies. Her voice, warm and familiar, was a balm to my frayed nerves. I stumbled through my story, the words pouring out in a chaotic jumble. Her silence on the other end of the line told me what I already knew. Even Sarah thought I was losing it. Listen, she began, her voice hesitant. I know you think this is real, but maybe it's the stress, the isolation. Maybe you should take a break. Come visit me in the city for a while. The disappointment in her voice stung, but I couldn't blame her. I don't know, Sarah. I muttered, deflated. Just think about it, she urged gently. Okay? After we hung up, a profound sense of loneliness washed over me. I was adrift, caught between reality and an experience that defied all logic. The mark on my arm throbbed, a constant reminder of the impossible night. The observatory, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison, I couldn't focus on my work. The cosmic signals that had fascinated me now mocked my fragile sanity. Every creaky floorboard whispered accusations. Every shadow loomed with a menacing potential. I jumped at every ping from the computers, terrified they might once again flash with that alien code. 3 days I endured, an insomniac plagued by flashes of that strange room and the creature's relentless stare. Finally, I snapped. Sleep deprivation and the crushing weight of my secret were eroding my mind. I had to find the truth, no matter how outlandish it may seem. Packing a few essentials, I left the observatory without any explanation to my baffled colleagues. Sarah's invitation echoed in my mind. A change of scenery, a friendly face. She might be right. But first, there was something I needed to do. My rental car rattled along the winding mountain road, and with each agonizing mile, the rational part of me screamed that this was a colossal mistake. Yet a burning conviction had taken root within me. If this was real, if my experience wasn't a mere breakdown, there would be evidence. And the only place to start was the beginning. The night the power went out. The sun dipped below the horizon as I pulled over at an isolated stretch of road near the observatory. The air had a crisp chill, carrying the distant scent of pine. Every instinct told me to turn back, yet I steeled myself and pushed open the car door. Armed only with my flashlight, I followed the dirt track that led to the power substation that fed the observatory. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm with each step. Reaching the small, concrete structure, I hesitantly pushed open the rusty metal door. A blast of stale air hit me as I stepped inside the cramped substation. Cobwebs shrouded disused machinery, and a thick layer of dust coated the concrete floor. The flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a cluster of old transformers and a control panel. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Dejected, I turned to leave, the disappointment almost as unbearable as the lingering fear. And then I saw it. A glint of metal caught my eye near the base of the main transformer. I knelt, tracing the flicker with my flashlight. It was a small silver disc, barely the size of a dime. My fingers trembled as I reached out and picked it up. The metal was smooth and cool beneath my touch, unearthly cool. As I turned it over in my hand, a jolt of shock coursed through me. A tiny symbol etched on its surface glowed faintly, a circle with a stylized V cutting through its center. A surge of adrenaline washed over me, replacing the gnawing fear. This was it. Tangible proof that something extraordinary had occurred. Now, I just needed to understand what it was, and why my encounter seemed linked to this artifact? Warning signal? Fear mingled with a strange sense of exhilaration. My astronomer's mind whirred, the desire to unravel this mystery overriding any doubts I clung to. But even as that excitement took root, I knew this was just the beginning. I was being drawn into something far larger than myself, a world teeming with unknown forces and unsettling implications. It terrified me, and yet a deeper part of me, a part I barely recognized, was ready for the chase. Sleep evaded me that night in a cheap roadside motel. The disc, wrapped carefully in a handkerchief, lay on the bedside table, its presence both reassuring and ominous. It was as if this alien trinket held a terrible power, a gateway to truths I had spent a lifetime seeking, yet also to potential dangers beyond my comprehension. The following morning, my head ached with conflicting emotions. Sarah's concerned face flickered through my mind, her voice urging caution. But another, more insistent voice whispered of answers, of a reality greater than I had ever imagined. With trembling hands, I reached for my laptop. This was no longer a solitary quest. If I was to make any sense of this, I needed expertise beyond my own. Dr. Alan Carter was an outlier in the field of astrophysics, an unconventional thinker with a reputation for entertaining fringe theories. At conferences, he was often either the object of ridicule or the center of hushed, excited debates. His work on fringe signal analysis was what drew my attention, particularly his controversial theories about potential communications hidden within seemingly random cosmic noise. Drafting an email with painstaking care, I laid out the bare bones of my experience, emphasizing the anomalous signal that preceded the blackout and the discovery of the disk. I attached a photo of the object, the odd symbol glowing eerily against the cheap motel bedspread. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours before a reply finally landed in my inbox. 3 words were all it took to shift the world on its axis. I'm intrigued. Talk? 24 hours later, I was seated across from Dr. Carter in his sparsely furnished university office. It was a surreal scene, an astronomer shaken by an unbelievable encounter, and a maverick physicist with the glint of a wild gamble in his eyes. I produced the silver disk. For a long, silent moment, he scrutinized it under a magnifying glass. "Where on earth did you get this?" he murmured. "That's the question, isn't it?" I replied, my voice raspy. I recounted my experience, from the initial signal to the blackout, the creature, the abduction, if that's what it was, and the agonizing aftermath. His expression never wavered, neither dismissive nor overtly surprised. When I was finished, a heavy silence hung in the air. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Emily, I'm going to be blunt. Most people, scientists especially, would assume you've suffered a breakdown. Stress, isolation, the pressure of your work. It would be a logical conclusion." "Which means you don't think I'm crazy?" I asked, a flicker of hope reigniting within me. "No, I don't. But I think we need to be careful. Very careful. The implications of what you're describing..." He trailed off, gesturing towards the disk that lay gleaming between us. "They're enormous. I need to know what this means, Dr. Carter. If they're out there, if they took me, I need the truth." He studied my face intently. "The road to that truth could be very dangerous, Emily, and lonely. Are you sure you're ready for that?" A flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Thoughts of Sarah, of my quiet life, the normalcy I had left behind, all rose to the surface. But they were swept away by an almost primal determination. "More than anything," I said, my voice firm. He nodded slowly. "All right, then. Here's what we do, this artifact." He picked up the disk. "It's likely extraterrestrial. The composition, the symbol, it's unlike anything we've encountered. I have colleagues in materials analysis, discreet people. They can run tests." My heart thudded against my ribs. "And the signal?" "That's trickier. I'm less confident we can glean anything immediately useful. It may be encrypted or on a frequency we don't monitor, but," he raised a finger, "there are less conventional channels to explore. Let's start with what we can analyze and go from there. This could take time, Emily. Are you prepared for that?" "Time is the one thing I have," I said with a wry smile. My life as I knew it was over. The Emily who studied stars through powerful telescopes was gone. In her place was someone thrust into a cosmic game, a player whose next move was shrouded in exhilarating uncertainty. The following weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings, cryptic emails exchanged under pseudonyms, and hurried trips to off-campus laboratories. Dr. Carter, true to his word, had assembled a small, trusted circle: a materials scientist, a cryptographer with shadowy ties to government agencies, and even a historian specializing in ancient symbols. The silver disk, it turned out, was composed of an alloy unlike anything on our periodic table. Its energy signature was faint but distinct, a dormant hum that sent shivers down my spine. The marking, the historian explained, bore a haunting resemblance to glyphs found in isolated cultures throughout history, symbols often associated with sky visitors and beings from other realms. It was tenuous, she had cautioned, and easily dismissed as pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns in chaos. Yet, the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, the cryptographer worked tirelessly on the signal I had recorded, feeding it through countless algorithms. There was noise, lots of it, but beneath, a faint pattern began to emerge, something too complex for mere randomness. It was during one of these furtive meetings that Dr. Carter dropped the bombshell. "Emily," he leaned forward, a conspiratorial glint in his eyes. "I've been approached." "Approached? By who?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Let's just say, interested parties, people with resources, people who also believe you may have encountered something." A smile played on his lips, a dangerous mix of excitement and caution. "The government?" I breathed. He nodded slowly. "Or an agency operating outside of it. They're aware of your work, of the anomalous signal. And it seems," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "they're aware of this as well." He gestured towards the disk, the epicenter of this whirlwind that had become my life. My mind raced. This was getting bigger, moving faster than I could comprehend. A part of me screamed to run, to disappear back into the safe anonymity of my prior existence. But the scientist in me, the relentless seeker, was ignited. It was a wildfire, consuming any remaining threads of rationality. It was time to stop being hunted and become the hunter. "What do they want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Information," Dr. Carter replied. "They want you, Emily. Your expertise, your experience, your insight into whatever is happening out there." He paused, weighing his next words. "This could be an opportunity, a chance to get real answers. But it comes with a price." "What kind of price?" "Anonymity is gone. They'll dig into every aspect of your life, Emily. Your past, your motivations. And," he lowered his voice further, "there may be parts of this operation that aren't entirely legal." The implications hung heavy in the air. Aligning myself with shadowy government forces, potentially crossing boundaries I never imagined. It went against every instinct I possessed. Yet, the alternative was to remain in the dark, forever the subject of their scrutiny, never the player in my own story. "What if I say no?" Dr. Carter shrugged. "They'll find a way to keep tabs on you, count on that, but they may also respect your decision. For now." He met my gaze, his own filled with a mix of caution and an unspoken challenge. "This is your call, Emily. Only yours." Sleep was impossible that night. Fear warred with determination, and a strange, reckless curiosity. This was no longer a scientific quest. It was personal. If they had been watching me, studying me, then I wanted to turn the tables. I wanted to do the observing for once. The following morning, I found Dr. Carter in his office, the blinds drawn against the bright winter sun. "I'm in," I said, my voice firm. "Let's meet your interested parties." 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in a sterile conference room within a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. The irony was almost comical. I'd spent my life gazing outwards at the cosmos, only to be drawn down into this clandestine world of gray suits and coded conversations. My only link to this shadowy world was Dr. Carter, who hovered near the door, his usual air of academic eccentricity replaced with a nervous energy. The room held 2 other occupants. The first was a woman, severe and impeccably dressed. Behind stylish glasses, her eyes were sharp, assessing me with the clinical detachment of a surgeon. Agent Barnes, she had introduced herself as, her voice clipped and efficient. Her partner, a man with the bulky build and humorless expression of a stereotypical bodyguard, merely grunted in acknowledgement. His sole purpose seemed to be to intimidate, and on that front, he was succeeding admirably. Agent Barnes wasted no time on pleasantries. "Dr. Grant," she addressed me with a formality that felt at odds with the circumstances, "we understand you've encountered anomalous phenomena." "That's one way of putting it," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Dr. Carter has vouched for your expertise," she continued, ignoring my sarcasm. "We're prepared to offer you access, resources, and protection. In return, you'll assist us in making sense of certain events. Your abduction, for instance." Goosebumps prickled across my skin. "You've been monitoring me." It wasn't a question. "Let's just say we have an interest in potential extraterrestrial contacts. That artifact you recovered." Her eyes flickered towards the discreet briefcase, where the silver disc lay concealed. "That confirmed you were on our radar, so to speak." "And if I refuse your generous offer?" I asked, folding my arms defensively. "As Dr. Carter explained, refusal isn't really an option." Her smile was thin, devoid of any warmth. "We can make your life very difficult, Dr. Grant, but cooperation has its benefits." My anger flared. "You mean threats?" "Consider them precautions." Agent Barnes remained unruffled. "This is a complex situation with implications for national security and beyond. We need the best minds, willingly or not." It was the ultimate blackmail, yet a twisted logic gnawed at me. They were right in a way. The disc, the signal, my experience, these things had catapulted me into a dangerous game far beyond my control. This agency, however unsavory, offered a chance to shape the game instead of forever being its pawn. "Let's hear the terms," I said, my resignation a bitter pill to swallow. A flicker of approval crossed Agent Barnes's face. "Smart choice, Dr. Grant." She opened a file on the table, the rustle of the papers echoing the clinical sterility of the room. "You'll be relocated? New identity? New residence? All arranged? Your disappearance will be attributed to a research opportunity abroad. Indefinite and untraceable." I swallowed. It was the erasure of my life as I knew it. Sarah's concerned face flashed through my mind, and a pang of guilt shot through me. "Your work with Dr. Carter will continue," Agent Barnes went on, unaware of my inner turmoil. "But under our supervision, naturally? You'll have access to facilities that most astronomers could only dream of." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Think of it as trading your mountaintop for other opportunities." Other opportunities. A chilling euphemism for places I might not want to imagine. My hands curled into tight fists beneath the table. "And my safety?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain even. "We'll ensure you're protected. Our resources are extensive." Her tone made it clear that protected could involve things well beyond my comfort zone. The bodyguard finally spoke. "Kidnapped once, huh, Doc?" His gruff voice grated. "Wouldn't want that happening again." I gritted my teeth. Submitting to this felt like a defeat, a betrayal of everything I had spent my life working towards. But the alternative was unthinkable. They had me trapped, and they knew it. "Do I really have a choice?" My question hung heavy in the air. Agent Barnes's smile was predatory. "You always have a choice, Dr. Grant, but some are wiser than others." I met her gaze, a cold fire igniting within me. My old life was gone, consumed by forces beyond my understanding. Yet, with a strange sense of defiance, I knew there was a fight left in me. This wasn't about surrender. It was about transformation. If they wanted my expertise, they would have it, but I would make them regret the day they decided to turn Emily Grant, the stargazer, into an asset in their shadowy games. My transition into clandestine existence was swift and unsettlingly efficient. Within a week, my apartment was stripped of anything remotely personal, my bank accounts frozen, and my academic accounts scrubbed of my work. They left behind a sterile, pre-furnished condo, a generic laptop, and a burner phone with a single number programmed. Sarah's calls went unanswered, her desperate messages evaporating into the digital void. Dr. Carter was my only link to the world I once knew. When he arrived, there was a sadness in his eyes, but also a flicker of something that bordered on admiration. "They're playing with forces they don't fully understand, Emily," he said quietly. "And so are you. Be careful." It was both a warning and a farewell. My new employers were true to their word. Within days, I was whisked away on a private jet to an undisclosed location. The facility, hidden within a sprawling military complex somewhere in the desert, was a labyrinth of gleaming corridors and high-tech labs. Scientists brushed shoulders with soldiers, and whispered conversations echoed through sterile hallways. The centerpiece was the observation room. It overlooked a vast circular chamber, bathed in an eerie blue light. From this vantage point, I could see the remnants of a craft, or whatever it was that had brought me here that fateful night. Shattered components littered the floor, gleaming with an odd, metallic luminescence. "Piece of the puzzle," Agent Barnes drawled from behind me, shattering my awed silence. "Not much to show for it, but look closer." She gestured to a distant section of the floor, and I saw them. 3 figures, or rather, the remains of them. Skeletal, slightly elongated, with eerily familiar proportions. My stomach lurched. "Think of them as specimens," she continued. "And you, Dr. Grant? Well, you're the expert." A cold dread seeped into my bones. This was my new reality, a world of aliens and agents, where I was no longer the wide-eyed researcher, but a key player in a game I barely understood. The Emily who craved the mysteries of the stars was now trapped, confined to an earthbound nightmare. Yet, a flicker of defiance remained. Knowledge was power, and they needed me. They had made me a prisoner, but they might have also made a dangerous mistake. My days turned into a bizarre, regimented routine. Supervised lab time, where I analyzed fragments of the alien craft and pored over the cryptic signal. Debriefings with Agent Barnes, who was unnervingly skilled at extracting information with a chillingly polite smile. Interrogations, they sometimes felt like, where humorless men in suits would grill me about my experiences. Sleep came in fitful bursts, plagued by nightmares of that shimmering space and those impossibly large eyes. With each passing day, the facility revealed more of its unsettling secrets. There were other specimens, beings unlike anything I'd ever encountered, some in gleaming containment chambers, others dissected with cold precision upon metal tables. This was no benevolent scientific endeavor, but a desperate attempt to reverse engineer the impossible, driven by fear and a ruthless hunger for power. The other scientists, a mix of wide-eyed idealists and cynical mercenaries, kept their distance. I was the anomaly, the astronomer turned abductee, whispered about in hushed tones. My expertise made me valuable, but my presence marked me as an outsider, a walking reminder that we weren't alone in the universe, and of those in power weren't necessarily in control. Yet, amidst this surreal existence, a twisted strategy began to take shape. They wanted my mind, the scientists' hunger for answers. I would give it to them, analyze their data, study their technology, and play the part of the eager participant. But simultaneously, a shadow Emily grew within me. She observed everything, took mental notes of surveillance patterns, memorized security codes, and observed the habits of the facility personnel. They had underestimated the astronomer's patience, her ability to track the slow movements of celestial bodies across millennia. I was playing the long game now. One evening, as the desert sunset painted the sky in streaks of defiant orange, a chance encounter shifted the balance of power. Dr. Ellis, a young physicist with perpetually disheveled hair and an air of distracted intensity, hesitantly approached me during a break in the lab. "The others, well, they're wary of you," he mumbled, barely meeting my eye. "Understandably?" I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "I'm not." His voice rose slightly, a tremor of defiance edging in. "I believe you, Dr. Grant, about what happened." Something within me, a part I thought long extinguished, stirred awake. Hope. My pulse quickened, but I forced my face into a mask of mild curiosity. "Is that so?" He shifted from foot to foot, then blurted, "I have resources, if you ever wanted to." He trailed off, his face flushing, but I knew he was offering a lifeline, a crack in the relentless machine I was trapped within. This was my chance. "Tell me more, Dr. Ellis," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm very interested in resources." The game was on, and Emily Grant, the pawn, was about to make her first bold move. My covert alliance with Dr. Ellis was a delicate dance in a world built on control and paranoia. We exchanged whispers in darkened supply closets, encrypted messages hidden within routine data logs. He was an unassuming pawn within the agency's hierarchy, a brilliant mind overlooked and underestimated. His access was limited, but his resentment of their methods burned as brightly as my own. Through Ellis, I learned of a communication blind spot, a legacy system they arrogantly dismissed as obsolete. It was risky, unbearably slow, but it offered a sliver of a chance to send a message beyond the walls of my sterile prison. That message had to be the right one. My dreams were no longer solely haunted by my abduction. They became a twisted training ground. I relived those moments aboard the alien craft, not as a victim, but as an observer. I noted details, the flicker of energy panels, the subtle shifts of light, the rhythmic hum that filled the space. The pieces of a language began to form in my mind, crude and fragmented, but a start nonetheless. My work for the agency earned grudging respect. The alloy of the alien craft defied our understanding, yet they couldn't deny the subtle insights I gleaned from its fragmented structure. Agent Barnes's watchful eye never left me for long, a constant reminder that I walked a tightrope between valuable asset and potential liability. One stifling afternoon, I was summoned to Barnes's office. Her sharp gaze scanned me as I took my seat. "You're making progress, Dr. Grant. Your work on the alloy, it's impressive." Was it a test? A trap? I merely inclined my head in acknowledgement. "But we need more. We need to understand their technology, how they travel." She leaned forward, her voice a barely contained hiss. "How they think." "That's going to take time," I responded, allowing a touch of calculated frustration to seep into my voice. "And resources." A flicker of a smile crossed her lips. "Resources can be acquired. What I need from you is a target, a goal, something that will give us leverage." My mind raced. This was a chance, dangerous, but potentially invaluable. I think I can establish a communication link," I said, choosing my words with careful manipulation. Her pupils dilated ever so slightly. "Communication?" "Rudimentary at best," I continued, feigning reluctance. "But if I could send a signal, prove that it's possible, well, that could give you enormous leverage." Leverage over the aliens, that's what they wanted. But my leverage would be over the agency itself. Agent Barnes steepled her fingers, her calculating gaze never leaving my face. It was a long, tense moment. Finally, she nodded. "Intriguing. I'll present the possibility to my superiors. And with that, the meeting was dismissed. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm as I left her office. The die was cast. My coded message to Ellis was a single urgent phrase: prepare the channel. It was time to gamble everything, to play my hand in this treacherous game where secrets and survival hung in the balance. The days that followed were a haze of excruciating tension. My every move was scrutinized, my work evaluated with a renewed intensity. I embraced the increased pressure, fueling my performance to mask the treacherous undercurrents swirling within. Dr. Ellis became a phantom presence, his brief coded messages both reassuring and agonizingly sparse. The legacy communications array, hidden deep within the bowels of the labyrinthine facility, beckoned. I knew accessing it would bring swift retribution if caught, but the alternative, inaction, complacency, was far more terrifying. One night, under the cover of a simulated containment breach that served as the perfect distraction, I slipped away from my quarters. My forged access codes hummed through my mind, a symphony of defiance against the cold order this place represented. With each clandestine step, I shed the image of Emily Grant, the subdued scientist, and embraced the shadow warrior I'd been forced to become. The old comm array was a relic from another era, a hulking beast of outdated tech and whirring machinery. Yet, to me, it offered the promise of escape, a lifeline desperately thrown across a cosmic abyss. Dr. Ellis waited in the darkened control room, a flicker of shared madness glinting in his eyes. "They won't understand how it was done," he whispered as the system groaned to life. "They won't have time." My fingers flew across the console, punching in the crude sequence of signals I had gleaned from my haunting memories. The transmission was an experiment, a desperate message encoded with the fragments of an alien language I barely understood. It might be a beacon to unknown forces out in the depths of space, or it might disappear into the uncaring void. Yet, it was undeniably an act of rebellion. As the signal stuttered out into the universe, a primal surge of exhilaration coursed through me. Whether I had contacted allies or stirred a hornet's nest remained to be seen, but inaction was no longer an option. The escape, as meticulously daring as the transmission, went off with surprising smoothness. Bribed guards, falsified records, and a malfunctioning security system, skillfully manipulated by Ellis, cleared our path. By the time the alarm was sounded, we were long gone, disappearing into the sprawling desert under the cloak of night. The desert was as unforgiving a landscape as the depths of space. We moved under the cover of darkness, guided by the stars I once studied with awe, now beacons of survival and a burning desire for revenge. Agent Barnes would move heaven and earth to recapture her prize. We were fugitives now, hunted not only by the agency, but by the chilling unknown forces I had blindly reached out to. Yet, as we pushed onward, the scientist within me couldn't suppress a sliver of anticipation. This wasn't just about survival. We had lit a fuse. The game had changed, and for the first time since my life had been thrown into disarray, the future, however uncertain, was mine to shape. The desert stretched before us, an endless expanse of moonlit sand. Exhaustion gnawed at my bones, and every rustle of the wind made me jump. But beneath the crushing weight of fear, a defiant spark flickered. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was blazing my own trail. Dr. Ellis, his awkward frame silhouetted against the luminous dunes, turned to me. "They'll know soon," he rasped, his voice a strained whisper. "They'll know what exactly?" I asked, clutching the stitched-together remains of my lab coat tighter around my shivering body. "That we're using obsolete tech, frequencies they don't monitor anymore. It'll give us a head start, but—" He trailed off, his gaze drifting towards the shimmering horizon. That single act, that desperate message flung into the cosmic expanse, could have far-reaching consequences. And now, we were the catalyst, the hunted architects of a potentially catastrophic chain of events. "Do you regret it?" I asked, the question hanging in the dry desert air. Ellis scratched his stubbled chin, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. "Regret is a luxury, Dr. Grant. I regret not acting sooner, not believing you." His eyes met mine, alight with newfound resolve. But now, there's only forward. Hours blurred into days as we trekked relentlessly, driven by a mix of adrenaline and the sheer will to survive. The relentless sun beat down, and the desolate landscape was a constant reminder of how insignificantly small we were in the grand scheme of things. Yet, amidst the hardship, an unexpected camaraderie blossomed between us. Dr. Ellis, once a meek figure in the sterile hallways of the facility, revealed a cunning mind and a surprising capacity for endurance. We shared survival tips, meager rations of water, and snatches of whispered conversation under the vast, star-studded sky. Then, like a mirage shimmering on the horizon, it appeared. A cluster of rusted trailers and ramshackle buildings on the desert's edge. A flicker of hope ignited within me. Ellis had spoken of contacts, people living on the fringes, distrustful of the establishment. People who might give us shelter. As we staggered closer, a gruff voice cut through the stifling air. "State your business!" A figure emerged from the shadows, a weathered woman with a rifle slung across her back. Dr. Ellis stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. His voice, usually hesitant, crackled with defiant energy. "We're refugees," he declared, "running from the same people who hunt the stars." The woman studied us intently. In her eyes, I saw the same flicker of rebellion that burned within me. It was a gamble, trusting another stranger in this treacherous new world we found ourselves in. But as I stood there, the weight of the silver disc heavy in my pocket, I knew there was no turning back. The game had only just begun, and the board was now vaster and more dangerous than ever.